my house guests were too afraid to sleep inside. I found them on the porch in the middle of the night, huddled together. And just like that, they confirmed the presence we had tried so desperately to deny. They were sitting in the old wicker chairs with blankets pulled to their chins, just staring out into the dark yard like it was a television screen. Their faces were pale. They didn't even turn when I opened the front door. The screen door creaked, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times, but that night, it sounded like a scream. "What are you guys doing out here?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep. "It's freezing." My friend Sarah finally looked over at me. Her eyes were wide, and I could tell she'd been crying. Her husband Mark just shook his head slowly, his gaze locked on the empty space beyond the porch railing. "We can't," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "We can't stay in that room. We can't stay in this house." That was the moment everything changed. The moment all my little excuses and rationalizations, all the times I told myself I was just tired or stressed, it all collapsed. Because deep down I knew exactly what they were talking about. I had just been too afraid to admit it to myself. Have you ever experienced something you just can't explain? Something that makes the hair on your arms stand up and a cold dread settle deep in your stomach? If you have, then maybe you'll understand. And if you haven't, I truly hope you never have to. The house on Maple Creek. To really understand what happened that night, you have to understand the house. My wife Anna and I bought it 3 years ago. We'd been looking for a place outside the city, somewhere quiet with a bit of land. The house on Maple Creek was perfect. It was a late 19th century farmhouse built in 1890, the realtor told us proudly. It had good bones, a wide front porch, and huge oak trees that had been there longer than the house itself. It felt like home the second we stepped inside. Now, I've always been a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. Ghosts, spirits, hauntings. To me, they were just stories, campfire tales for a cheap thrill. Every creak in an old house has an explanation: drafts, a settling foundation, old plumbing. That's what I told myself. That's what I told Anna. And for the first year, it worked. Life was idyllic. We painted, planted a garden, and got a golden retriever named Buster. The house had its quirks, of course, old houses always do. There was a cold spot in the upstairs hallway that never seemed to get warm, no matter how high we cranked the heat. Sometimes you'd hear what sounded like faint footsteps from the attic, but we just wrote it off as squirrels or the house settling. Misplaced keys, a book falling off a shelf, it was all just life. Explainable. The first thing that truly gave me pause happened about a year in. Anna was out of town visiting her sister, so it was just me and Buster. I was downstairs watching a movie, the house completely silent except for the TV. Around 11, I heard a distinct noise from upstairs, a soft, rhythmic thumping. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from our bedroom. My first thought was Buster had gotten upstairs and was wagging his tail against the bed. But then I looked down and he was fast asleep at my feet. I muted the TV. The sound continued, slow and deliberate. Thump, thump, thump. I'm not the hero in a horror movie. I didn't grab a bat and go running up the stairs. I just sat there, frozen, listening. I told myself it was the pipes, the water heater, anything. The sound went on for another 2 minutes, then stopped as suddenly as it started. I didn't sleep well that night. I locked our bedroom door, which I never did, and left the hall light on. When Anna got home, I told her about it, trying to laugh it off. But she didn't laugh. She just got this strange look on her face. "That's happened to me before," she said quietly. "When you're at work, I always thought it was my imagination." That was the first real crack in my skepticism. The first time I felt that icy finger of fear trace down my spine. But it's amazing what the human mind can ignore when it wants to. We didn't talk about it again, we just pushed it down. It was easier that way. After that, the small things started to pile up. We'd come home to find cabinet doors wide open. Not just one, but all of them in the kitchen, as if someone had opened each one on purpose. We'd hear whispers that sounded like a radio in another room. But the moment we'd try to find it, There was only silence. Anna started having terrible nightmares. She'd wake up gasping, telling me she dreamed a woman was standing at the foot of our bed just watching us. A woman with long, dark hair and a pale, sorrowful face. I'd hold her and tell her it was just a dream. But the image she described was so vivid it started to haunt me too. Even our dog Buster changed. He used to be so happy-go-lucky, but he started refusing to go into certain parts of the house. The upstairs hallway, with the cold spot, became a no-go zone. He'd stand at the bottom of the stairs and just growl, this low, guttural sound from deep in his chest, his eyes fixed on nothing at the top of the landing. Sometimes his head would follow something we couldn't see as it moved across a room. We took him to the vet, thinking his eyesight was going. The vet said he was perfectly healthy, but that was just the beginning. The guests. A few weeks later, things took a much darker turn. Our friends, Sarah and Mark, were driving up to spend the weekend. We were excited. We hadn't seen them in months, and had been talking up our peaceful country life. The irony isn't lost on me now. They arrived on a Friday evening as the sun was setting. We gave them the grand tour, showed them the garden, and finally, the guest room. It was at the far end of the upstairs hallway, right past the cold spot. We'd just painted it a warm, welcoming yellow. That first night was great. We had a barbecue, sat on the porch, and talked late into the night. Around midnight, we all turned in. Sarah and Mark loved their room. I remember Mark saying how quiet it was compared to their city apartment. "You can actually hear the crickets," he'd said. I fell asleep fast, but I was woken up around 3 a.m. by a muffled cry, followed by a door slamming shut. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding. Anna was still asleep. I strained my ears, listening. Nothing. Then I heard it again, the front door opening and closing. My first thought was that someone was sick. I slipped out of bed and went downstairs. The living room was dark. I walked to the front of the house, looked out the window, and that's when I saw them. Sarah and Mark were on the porch, wrapped in blankets from their bed. I opened the door, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. "What are you guys doing out here?" Sarah jumped. She looked at me, her face a mask of pure terror. "We couldn't stay in there," she whispered. Mark just stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. "What do you mean?" "What happened?" I asked, stepping out onto the cold porch with them. Sarah took a shaky breath. "We were asleep," she began, her voice cracking. "And I woke up because I was freezing cold. Mark was awake too. The air in the room was just icy. Then we heard it." "Heard what?" I asked, but I think I already knew. "A sound," Mark said, his voice low, like someone dragging their nails across the old wardrobe in the corner. He described it perfectly, a slow, deliberate scraping that seemed to echo in the dead silence. They both lay there frozen, too scared to move. They hoped it was a mouse, anything. But then the scraping stopped, and a new sound started. "It was whispering," Sarah said, tears filling her eyes. Right next to the bed. It sounded like a woman, but the words were wrong. It wasn't English, it wasn't any language I've ever heard, it was just hateful sounds. My blood ran cold. Anna's nightmares, the whispers, the feeling of being watched, it was all real. And then, Mark continued, his voice barely audible. The door handle started to jiggle. Slowly at first and then violently, like someone was trying to break in. He said that's what finally broke their paralysis. They leaped out of bed, grabbed the blankets, and just ran. They didn't even stop for shoes. They ran out of the room, down the stairs, and out the front door. They'd been sitting on the porch for over an hour, too terrified to come back inside and too scared to wake us, just waiting for the sun to come up. I stood there with them, the cold seeping into my bones, and I had nothing to say. There were no more excuses. The fear on my friends' faces was real, and it was a mirror of the fear I had been trying to suppress for months. The presence we had tried so hard to deny had finally made itself known, and it had used our guests to do it. A history of shadows. After Sarah and Mark left, and they left the second the sun was up, making a flimsy excuse about a family emergency, the house felt different. The silence was heavier. The shadows seemed darker. Knowing we weren't crazy didn't bring relief. It brought a new, sharper kind of terror. That's when Anna and I finally started talking. Really talking. We laid out every strange occurrence, every dismissed feeling, every whispered sound on the kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle. I remembered something from months before. I was in my home office and saw a figure walk past the window, a woman in a long, dark dress moving from the woods toward the side of the house. Her movement was strange, like she was gliding. I told myself it was a lost neighbor, but we live on 5 acres. Our nearest neighbor is a quarter mile away. When I went outside, no one was there, not a single footprint in the soft ground. Anna shared things she'd been too afraid to tell me. One afternoon, while cleaning the kitchen, she heard a woman's voice clear as day, hum along to the music she was playing right behind her. She spun around to find the room empty. Another time, she was folding towels in the living room. She turned her back for a second, and the whole stack of neatly folded towels was on the floor, as if it had been pushed off the table in one clean motion. Buster was cowering under a chair, whimpering. We saw a pattern. The activity was mostly upstairs near the guest room, but it was getting bolder, moving downstairs, happening in broad daylight. It felt like it was escalating. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I started digging. I spent hours in the local library's history archives, going through old property records and newspapers. What I found made the hair on my neck stand up. The farmhouse was built by the Hawthorne family. They had a daughter, Elspeth, who died in the house in 1898 at the age of 28. The cause of death was listed as a wasting sickness, but town annals hinted at rumors of a broken heart and a deep despair that led her to lock herself in her room until she just faded away. And her room, according to the old floor plans? It was the guest room. I also found a diary entry from a woman who lived there in the 1970s. She wrote about the unsettling feeling in the home, about hearing a woman crying, and about her kids complaining that a sad lady would watch them play. They moved out after only 6 months. The pieces were coming together, but the picture they formed was terrifying. Our house didn't just have old pipes. It had a history of sorrow. And it seemed that history wasn't content to stay in the past. The woman at the door. The climax came about a week after our guests fled. The house had been unnervingly quiet, the calm before the storm. The air was thick with it. It was a Tuesday night. Anna had fallen asleep early, worn out from the stress. I was up late, sitting in the living room with a book on my lap. I wasn't reading. I was just listening. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock. Around 1 a.m., Buster, who was lying at my feet, shot bolt upright. A low growl rumbled in his chest, his eyes locked on the bottom of the staircase. He wasn't barking. He just stared, his body rigid. Then I heard it. A single soft footstep on the hardwood floor of the upstairs landing. My entire body went cold. I wasn't imagining it. Buster heard it too. Another footstep followed. Then another. Someone was walking slowly down the hallway right toward the stairs. I couldn't move, pinned to the chair, every muscle screaming to run. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. The silence that followed was deafening. Buster's growl deepened, a desperate warning to whatever was standing up there in the dark. I held my breath, trying to see any shape in the oppressive blackness of the stairwell. And then I saw her. It wasn't a full figure at first, just a distortion in the dark. A patch of black that was somehow blacker than the rest. It began to descend, one slow step at a time. With each step, the form grew more solid. A woman. Long, dark hair hung like a shroud around a face I couldn't yet see. She wore a long, dark dress just like the figure from the yard. I tried to call for Anna, but all that came out was a choked whisper. The figure paused halfway down the stairs, as if she'd heard me. It felt like she was looking right at me. The cold spot from the hallway seemed to pour down the stairs with her, washing over the room in an Arctic wave. I could see my own breath. Buster was now whimpering, backing away toward the kitchen. She took another step, then another, until she was at the bottom of the staircase, not 15 feet away. She just stood there, perfectly still, radiating a palpable sense of sorrow and rage so intense it felt physical. Then she lifted her head. Her face was pale. almost translucent. Her eyes were just dark, empty sockets, but I could feel her gaze on me, a crushing weight. And her mouth? Her mouth was open, locked in a silent scream. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in that silent confrontation. It felt like an eternity. Then, with an impossibly slow movement, she raised a hand and pointed. Not at me, at the front door. A loud crash from upstairs shattered the spell. It sounded like furniture being thrown against the wall. The woman at the bottom of the stairs flickered like a dying flame. And then, she was gone. The air rushed back in, the oppressive cold vanished, and I gasped for breath, shaking uncontrollably. I scrambled up the stairs 2 at a time, my only thought on Anna. I burst into our bedroom and found her sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror, staring at our closed door. "Did you hear that?" she cried. "The crash?" I asked, my voice trembling. "No," she said, shaking her head. "Before that, the screaming. A woman was screaming right outside our door. The mass exodus." We were gone a week later. We didn't even try to sell the house. We packed what we had to, called a moving company for everything else, and just left. We gave the keys to the bank and walked away. I couldn't spend another night there. Neither could Anna. The terror that drove our friends out into the cold was something we had tried to ignore. But after seeing that figure on the stairs, after what Anna heard, there was no more denying it. We never found out what caused the crash. We never went back into the guest room. I don't want to know. Sometimes survival is a form of ignorance. We live in a modern apartment in the city now. The rooms are small, and you can always hear the traffic, but it doesn't feel empty. It doesn't feel like you're being watched. I still think about that house on Maple Creek. I think about the history buried in its walls, about Elspeth and her bottomless sorrow. Was that her? Was she trying to drive us out? Or was she trying to warn us? I'll never have the answers. Some stories just don't have a neat ending. We never saw the figure again, but to this day, I can't sleep in a completely dark room. I always leave a light on in the hallway, and every time I hear the floorboards creak in the dead of night for just a second, a part of me is right back in that living room, staring at the woman at the bottom of the stairs. Have you ever had to flee your own home? Have you ever had an experience so terrifying it forced you to leave everything behind? Let me know in the comments. Reading your stories helps me feel a little less alone in all this. If you're interested in hearing more stories like this one, consider subscribing. It lets me know you're out there, listening in the dark. Thanks for listening.